this, lads. But it's been revealed with Sophie Cunningham. Fever wing Sophie Cunningham was fined twice for behavior at the end of the clash, but her misconduct appears to be already paying dividends. She received a $400 fine, as well as an additional undisclosed penalty for her role in the shoving match that followed. It's probably not more than $1,000.
Marina Marbury shoves Caitlin Clark to the ground after she's slashed in the eye by one player, rushed by another. Like, I can clearly see why some of y'all teams in the WNBA are just not successful, bro. Like, y'all don't know how to act. We just gonna call it for what it is. Y'all don't know how to act. Like, there's basketball stuff, and then there's just completely playing dirt.
You know, it's wild what the WNBA trying to do to Sophie Cunningham. I love Sophie Cunningham because at the end of the day, you supposed to, how I was taught, and me growing up playing sports, we protecting each other, bro. At the end of the day, all for one, one for all. So look, you think I'm going to keep allowing you to beat up on my teammate and my teammate playing clean ball, but you trying to poke. Y'all literally been beating this girl up, pushing her on the floor, pulling her hair, poking her in the eye. You hear me? That's dangerous.
And seeing how things are run, seeing how things are done, and after you've seen what it looks like to get it right, and you come in and see something looking really wrong, you're going to call it out. It is what it is. You're going to be critical of players. If they do something shady or classless, you're going to call that out. That's what fans do. And it's not hate or any of that other crap that Kathy Engelbert wants to cook up to try to suppress free speech. Nah, we're not getting down with that. All right, so anyway.
It's one of the strangest paradoxes in modern sports. How does a player get ejected from a game, fined by the league, and see their reputation skyrocket overnight? How does standing your ground for less than 10 seconds turn you into a revolutionary symbol? The WNBA thought it was sending a message when it punished Phoenix Mercury guard Sophie Cunningham. But they fundamentally misread the room, and in doing so, they didn't just create a controversy, they accidentally crowned a new queen. This is the story of how the league tried to make an example out of one player, and instead, the fans made an icon out of her. To understand how we got here, you have to understand the atmosphere of the game itself. The Indiana Fever, led by the generational talent Caitlin Clark, were in town to play the Phoenix Mercury. And by this point in the season, every game featuring Clark had become a national event. Played under a microscope, the attention was a blessing for the league, but for Clark, it came with a heavy price. From the moment she stepped onto a WNBA court, she was treated less like a rookie phenom and more like a human pinball, bounced between defenders in a style of play that often blurred the line between physical and a personal vendetta. Fans had been watching it all season, the off-ball shoves, the hard screens, the post-whistle bumps. It was a constant, simmering tension. So when the Fever and Mercury faced off, the air was already thick with anticipation. It felt less like a regular season game and more like a powder keg waiting for a spark. And that spark came not from a star player, but from a veteran who decided she had seen enough. Enter Sophie Cunningham. To casual fans, she might have just been another player on the court. But those who follow the league know she's always been defined by a certain kind of grit. This is a player who was a kicker on her high school's varsity football team. She's reportedly trained in Taekwondo. She has a reputation for being tough, competitive, and fiercely loyal to her teammates. She's not the type of person to back down from a challenge. And that's a crucial piece of the story. She isn't a player who seeks out drama, but she's also not one to walk away when it finds her. The game was chippy as expected, but the defining sequence began late in the fourth quarter. It started with a skirmish involving Caitlin Clark, where she was shoved to the ground on a dead ball by Dejounte Carrington. It was yet another moment that had fans and analysts screaming at their screens. Tensions were now at a boiling point. Just a few plays later, Carrington gets a steal and is heading for a fast break layup. Racing alongside her is Sophie Cunningham, in a move seen 1,000 times in basketball. Sophie commits a wrap-up foul to prevent the easy basket. She bear hugs Carrington to stop the play. Now, was it a hard foul? Yes. Was it a dirty foul? That's debatable. It wasn't a shove from behind or a trip. It was a clear attempt to stop the momentum and send a player to the free throw line as standard, if aggressive, basketball play, but in the context of the game's existing tension. It was like throwing a match on gasoline. Immediately, players from both teams converged. And this is the moment that changed everything for Sophie Cunningham. As the scrum formed, Sophie didn't throw a punch, she didn't shove back, she didn't escalate the situation. Instead, she found herself face to face with Carrington, stood her ground, braced herself, and held her position. She simply existed. She was a wall of defiance. A silent statement that the Mercury weren't going to be pushed around. For that act of quiet solidarity, for refusing to retreat while chaos erupted around her. The referees made a stunning decision. They ejected her from the game. The sight was bizarre. Sophie was marched off the court with a look of sheer disbelief on her face. Commentators were confused. Fans were apoplectic. The league's message seemed to be that the initial aggressors in these situations could remain, but the player who stood firm in the aftermath had to go. It felt like a fundamental miscarriage of justice, punishing the reaction more harshly than the action itself. A few days later, the WNBA handed down its official verdict. Sophie Cunningham was fined for $100 for her role in the shoving match, along with an additional undisclosed penalty. The league likely thought this would be the end of it, a small fine, a clear message, and everyone moves on, but they had made a colossal error in judgment. They had failed to account for the power of the modern fan. Almost instantly, a movement was born. It didn't start with petitions or angry letters. It started with a click, then another and another. Fans, feeling powerless to change the referee's call or the league's decision, found a different way to make their voices heard. They opened their wallets. They decided that if the league was going to punish Sophie Cunningham for what they saw as an act of loyalty, then they would reward her for it. The Sophie Cunningham merchandise page became the site of a digital rebellion. Her jersey, number 9 for the Phoenix Mercury, started flying off the virtual shelves. T-shirts, hoodies, anything with her name on it became a must-have item. It wasn't just about fashion, it was a statement. It was the most 21st century form of protest imaginable, retail therapy as an act of defiance. Each purchase was a vote, a message sent directly to the league's front office that said, "We see what you did and we stand with her." The phenomenon went viral. Reports and social media buzz claimed that for a period, Sophie Cunningham's jersey had become the #1 selling jersey in the entire WNBA, even briefly surpassing the sales juggernaut that is Caitlin Clark. Think about that. A player becomes the most popular merch item in the league not for a game-winning shot, but for getting ejected while defending a teammate. It was a stunning turn of events that laid bare the massive disconnect between the league's administration and its new, passionate fanbase. And what was Sophie's reaction to all of this? In interviews, she was humble, almost dismissive of her newfound fame. She kept repeating that her focus was on basketball, on winning games, and on keeping the main thing the main thing. She didn't lean into the drama or try to position herself as a martyr. She just wanted to play ball and stick up for her teammates. This quiet, no-nonsense response only made her more endearing to the fans who had rallied behind her. She was the reluctant icon, a hero who never asked for the title. This entire episode created a tale of two completely different narratives. In the WNBA's version of the story, Sophie Cunningham was an instigator who engaged in misconduct and was disciplined accordingly. They were enforcing the rules to maintain order. But in the fans' version of the story, Sophie was a hero. She was upholding the unwritten code of sports. You protect your own, especially when it feels like no one else will. She became a symbol for every fan who felt the league wasn't doing enough to protect its biggest star from cheap shots. This whole affair speaks to a much larger issue. In sports, there is a sacred, unspoken rule that you have your teammates back. When someone on your team is being targeted, you stand with them. It's about more than just the game, it's about loyalty and respect. The WNBA, in its attempt to crack down on physicality, seemed to punish an expression of that loyalty by ejecting Sophie. The league inadvertently sent a message that standing by your teammate is a punishable offense, especially if it makes things uncomfortable. The league wanted to make an example out of Sophie Cunningham, and in a way, they succeeded. Just not in the way they intended. They wanted to show that her behavior wouldn't be tolerated. Instead, they showed an entire generation of new fans that they were out of touch. They tried to control the story, but the fans hijacked it and wrote their own ending, an ending where the player who got ejected became the protagonist. Sophie Cunningham didn't become a fan favorite because she was a rebel. She became one because, in a moment of chaos, she was the one person who seemed to be standing for something. And in the eyes of the fans, that was worth more than any fine the league could ever issue. The question now is, did the WNBA learn anything from this? Or was this just another chapter in a season defined by their struggle to understand the very audience they worked so hard to attract?